Do you enjoy reading? Do you enjoy reading short stories? Do you enjoy reading scary stories? Then I have just the thing for you, Stories of the Bizarre and Terrifying Omnibus 1, a complete collection of all of my short stories so far in one handy little collection. It also comes with a handful of neat little extras, including a glossary of all the creatures and forces I've created over the years, author's notes providing insight into my creative process and inspirations, and even 2 all-new short stories that function as proof of concepts for 2 ideas I've had for much bigger works. If you're at all interested, feel free to check out the links in the description. It's available in both ebook, paperback, and for the first time ever, hardcover. In this current age of gaming, remakes of classic titles have increasingly become the norm. That's become more evident especially this year in 2023. Realistically though, this was something that was inevitable, thanks to the industry's refusal to archive and preserve titles in almost any way, as well as these remakes being a safe way for publishers to test the waters for legacy IPs to see whether or not they're still viable. Though this does come with some risks, such as the remake replacing the original in the public consciousness, or the remake being botched so badly that it destroys interest in the property. There seemed to be a greater risk of the latter happening with the System Shock remake. To say Night Dive's crowdfunded remake of one of the most beloved and hard-to-play games of all time had trouble would be an understatement. Delays after delays, internal turmoil, and at one point a complete reboot of development were all reasons to be skeptical that the studio specializing in the remastering of classic games could pull this off. Yet they did! The System Shock remake is an absolute joy to play. Everything from the fun and frustration was successfully brought over into a modern mold, making something that both new and old fans can play and enjoy. Especially the old. Right off the bat, Night Dive did an impeccable job of translating the original game into a modern form, bringing modern design principles and gameplay innovations to a title that is notoriously hard to play, even with its more accessible remaster. And I know, I've played it, it was a chore. This has been achieved without sacrificing any of the challenge that was at the core of System Shock. See, this game is a lot like the Senna and Kagura series. Just like how those games demanded you pay attention to what was really important, this remake demands that you pay attention to just about everything. Audio logs, text logs, the environment, the map, and literally the signs pointing what room is where the condom dispensers are located. You need to pay attention in order to organically figure out where you need to go in order to complete objectives, because this game just does not hold your hand. It'll point you in the right direction, but it trusts your intelligence to actually follow that direction and pick up where you need to go. This is something most games these days just don't really do anymore. I can only recall 2 games in recent memory that did something like this. The first was the Doom 3 BFG edition, which arguably doesn't count. But that game was linear and it had simple objectives without markers to point them out. The other was Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but in that game, that was an optional setting, and even when it was enabled, it was impossible to get lost on where to go. So in System Shock, when you figure out where you need to go through thought, deduction, and organic exploration, it creates a sense of pride and accomplishment on par with firing the BFG in Doom for the first time, except here it's every time. That doesn't mean there won't be times where you get frustrated, either from failing to figure out where to go and what to do, or from stumbling into a location with enemies you're just not ready for. But I still found myself having fun in these situations, until I either broke through or explored elsewhere. Hell, with how closely the levels have been recreated from the original, those familiar with that version will breeze through this. Tons of longtime fans have been going on about how, thanks to their experience with the original, they've basically got a strategy guide in their heads. But for everyone else, there will be times where you will get frustrated and do one of 2 things. Quit, take a break, then come back later, or just throw up your hands and look the solution to your problem up in a walkthrough, which is something I did more than once when I either got lost or just couldn't figure out what information in my logs was for what I was trying to do. However, a bigger issue from translating the old challenge has been that death has no real penalty anymore. Yeah, you can get a game over, but that's only if you haven't restored the respawn point in the current level. Once you've done that, every time you die, you just respawn there. No real punishment survives from you killing all the enemies in a level and lowering the security level, thus reducing the threats and their respawn rates. So the penalty is just the tedium that emerges of running through a now empty level with little to no new enemies as you just try to reach your planned destination. Hell, in some specific situations, you can even turn death into a form of fast travel. If you haven't restored the respawn point on a level, then when you die, outside of specific circumstances, you'll respawn at the point of the nearest level. So if that level is where you need to be or has the medical pod, then death just becomes fast travel, something that sucks a lot of the dread out of the experience. Hell, BioShock handled death a lot better, because in that game, at least the respawn points would steal a few dollars out of your wallet for the work. But it should be said that the setting of Citadel Station is just brimming with personality and charm. Each level of it has a distinct look and feel, not only making each level unique, but also giving the setting a real sense of believability. Even with the labyrinthine layouts, when you enter a room or find a maintenance tunnel, it feels like it belongs there, and not because a level designer said it needed to be there because he said so. To go along with it, we get some well done environmental storytelling which fills in the gaps of the main plots, intentionally keeping things obscure for intrigue's sake. I remember on the executive level stumbling on a dining area where a massacre had taken place, a location where the suits were lured so they could be cold maybe? Then I later found an audio log revealing that that was where those suits had tried to make a last stand against the station's rogue AI, Shodan. That explained the handful of weapons that were there, as well as the bodies in the connecting storage room. Other examples of this include finding a room where a group of people began worshipping Shodan and sacrificed themselves to her, and a hangar with a ship ready to escape if it wasn't for all the escapees being dead, which explained the presence of a robot enemy and a cyborg sniper in the hangar. All of this comes together to really give System Shock a fantastic horror atmosphere, which is helped by the fact that every enemy has the potential to reduce you to a red smear on the wall, turning every time you journey through a hallway for the first time, let alone a level, a tense experience. It should also be said that the texture work gives this game a unique stylistic look. Similar to Boltgun, everything has a crunchy, pixelated or voxel-based texture to it. This means everything looks good at medium and far distance, while more lacking up close, but also gives the game a unique stylized look, where it feels like the devs tried to scan as much of the original's visuals and stretch them over the modern 3D visuals. The result has been some great translations of the old enemy designs, where they look more terrifying than cartoony without lacking those cartoonish proportions. Hell, they even threw in some of the original sprites as hallucinations as a fun Easter egg. All of the stylistic decisions for Citadel Station have guaranteed that it is going to age well for the foreseeable future. But getting back to the atmosphere, it does need to be said that it does fade over time. I mentioned this before, but once you've killed the enemies and lowered the security level in a level, the levels become rather dead, since as you do this, you impede Shodan's ability to know where you are and thus know where to send new enemies to hunt you. You will become well acquainted with these levels because there is a lot of backtracking in this game, and you will learn the layouts one way or another. That alone takes away a lot of the atmosphere, and the diminishing enemy respawns takes away a lot of the dread as you master Citadel Station one level at a time, with the only new difference being the blood and the gibs of the enemies you killed first time around, making traversal of older areas a bit of a slog as you progress. However, it needs to be said that Shodan is a great antagonist. Yeah, she's a rather cheesy, megalomaniacal rogue AI that sees herself as a god in the making, but she is so entertaining, and every time she calls you, it's just fun. Fans of Handsome Jack from Borderlands will feel right at home with her, as she regularly calls the player to mock them, but unlike Handsome Jack, she has a much greater presence. She actually does things. She does what she says, as she is genuinely watching every step you make through the security cameras. This creates a sense of unease and adds to the atmosphere, since she knows where you are and can spawn in enemies as needed to throw the player off. But once again, this is something I've already touched on, because you can take down her cameras and her processing centers in order to blind her, making it easier for you to get around, and thus lowering the enemy respawn rates and adding to the tedium of going through well-trodden areas with nothing new thrown at you. This robs her of her usual dread, but at least it doesn't take away from her megalomaniacal personality or her charm.
You cannot hide.
It should also be said that System Shock isn't exactly a narrative-heavy experience, at least not in the way you'd expect. What I mean by that is that it's not lacking in story or poorly written, in fact it's the complete opposite. We get a richly detailed narrative that will leave the player hungry to find out more, it's just told very sparingly. The player has to piece most of it together through the audio logs, text logs, and environmental storytelling, letting you piece together the broad strokes as well as the finer details on their own because of how the game respects your intelligence. There is some more traditional storytelling in the form of characters like Shodan and an outsider who calls you up, but that's more to let the player know what their current objective is than anything to do with the real meat and potatoes. It should also be said that Night Dive did expand upon the game's intro, not only recreating the original game's intro but adding to it, by letting us explore the hacker's apartment and get a feel for his personality and life. This one small touch adds a lot to a now forgotten silent protagonist and elevates him with insight into his personality and lifestyle, much like how Doom Eternal's Fortress of Doom did the same for the Doom Slayer.
Single digit of the system authorization code.
Then I will see to your reprimanding, personally.
Now to finally touch on the gameplay side of things, it needs to be said that this is not an immersive sim. Unlike System Shock 2 where you could specialize in skills and approach objectives in different ways, this game is more like a simple FPS at the core. For people who are only familiar with the sequel, it's understandable they would be disappointed, but that doesn't detract from the experience. In fact, there are still some immersive sim aspects to combat, in that energy weapons are better against robots, while bullet weapons are better against cyborgs and mutants. However, combat does take away from the experience, since a winning strategy for just about every enemy with only one or two exceptions is to peek around a corner, shoot at them, duck away, poke out again, and keep shooting until they're dead. This works with almost every enemy because the enemy AI typically lacks the cognitive ability to realize maybe they should reposition themselves before firing off another shot. As you progress, you will also discover weapon upgrades, new abilities, and forms of protection. This opens up new ways to engage enemies and traverse the environment, since there are rooms that you can't survive more than a moment in thanks to hazards like radiation, so you can't explore them for resources until you've progressed further and found something like the biohazard pack, or the jump boots. When you find these, they turn your run into Usain Bolt's top speed if he was on meth when he competes, as well as letting you levitate, not only opening more exploration options when searching for secrets, but it also makes it easier to get around the attacks of some of the game's bosses, bringing the game closer, but not quite all the way to the immersive sim genre. It should also be said that when compared to other games, we end up with a limited but focused arsenal of weapons to use. We get things like pistols, shotguns, Star Trek phasers, railguns, energy rifles, and a wrench, for example. But there's additional mechanics that gives the weapons extra depth. Ammo-based weapons, for instance, can use different types of ammo, with one working better against another type of enemy, while energy-based weapons have different firing modes that can use more energy for stronger attacks. On top of these, there are optional weapon upgrades the player can find and buy throughout Citadel Station. These add extras like alternate firing modes for the ammo-based guns, more ammo, or increased energy efficiency. So while the shooting may be basic, that doesn't mean it ain't based, especially when Night Dive went so far as to give the game some damn good jibs that turn fleshy enemies into blood pinatas when you got the right weapon primed for the bloodshed. The only thing left to touch on are the cyberspace sequences. You hack into cyberspace at times for things like getting information or unlocking doors. This plays out not like a basic minigame, but more like a tech demo for a remake of Descent. It controls well and has some shallow but noticeable depth to it as you use different programs to deal with virus enemies, of whom there's actually a decent sized roster to encounter, and they have enough surprises to keep you on your toes, like an ice status that requires you use a drill program to pierce the ice before making the virus virus vulnerable to your regular attack. This is a nice distraction, and it had more effort put into it than it needed, and taking that into consideration really drives home the love and passion that went into this remake as a whole. If you need me to make it clearer, buy this game. The System Shock remake is a bona fide classic in its own right, and in a year of banger releases, it's a strong contender for my critical game of the year. Newcomers will discover a classic in its ultimate form, while longtime fans will find something that'll be happy to bust their balls like it's 1994 all over again. And... Wait, I just remembered. There was an animation in a demo based on an earlier build of the game, with the cyborg doctors. If you killed one of their patients and they noticed it was dead, they'd make this fun animation where they panicked before going over another patient. And they removed it. Right, forget everything else I just said, this game sucks. Alright, thanks for checking out my video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you really liked it, please hit the like and the subscribe buttons. That would really help me out in the algorithm. Now for the next game, I'm going to be taking a look at Aliens Dark Descent. Sorry about this video being so late. I've just been caught up with a whole bunch of stuff going on in life at the moment, and this kind of got just mixed up in everything. After Aliens though, I'm planning to review some stuff from my backlog, so I got all that more coming up, so please stick around.